Hello, everybody. Just finishing up logging into here so I can see the chats just in case. How are you? You excited for our 5th book club meeting? Sorry, this one needed to be postponed by an hour. I'm not feeling my best, but it's okay. The show must go on. I have books to read with you and things that we need to, finish in a certain kind of sort of timeline thing because we're trying to get this done before Samhain. Well, at least to a certain section before Samhain. But hello, my name's Elena and I'm enchanted for you to be here on my channel. Hello and welcome. Glad you're here. If you're new, consider liking, subscribing, becoming part of my little YouTube family. And if you've been here before, hello and welcome back to each and every one of you amazing and beautiful souls right across the screen. Lots of love and warm hugs, and hopefully you and yours are safe. I haven't done that intro in a while, I feel like. So this is our 5th meeting about our book club on Elemental Witchcraft by Heron Michelle. And today we are going over pages 103. Yes, page 103 up until page 132, right before the meditation. So if you're following along on like an e-reader that does not have page numbers, it's pretty much the start of chapter 5 all the way until right before the 3rd meditation. Now, on the previous live chat, I was talking about doing a recording of the meditations she has in the book. I unfortunately have not had a chance to get around to doing that because I was at my Viking camp, which was exhausting. It was kind of one of my least favorite ones because we were camping on a beach and it's October and it's cold and it's raining and it's windy and we're just in a tent with a ton of blankets and it was cold and I was a little bit grumpy. I'm happy I'm not sick from it, but I do have a bit of a headache today. Okay, how are you? How are you enjoying the book so far? We got through quite a lot together. I did not post the last book coven meeting on my website yet. I did post all the other ones, so everything except last week's because I was at camp starting Thursday. I didn't get a chance to finish that. I will finish that today, and then I will be like up to date with all of the book coven meetings and blog posts. That is my goal, to make sure I'm up to date because I keep saying I'm gonna do that, and things keep popping up, but I'll get that. I'm sorry. Do you have any like specific, I don't know, feelings, thoughts in regards to this book? Again, in the previous meeting, I mentioned a lot how she really brings in like the Wiccan ideology into this book, which I'm not a huge fan of since it's supposed to be more eclectic. But the pages that we did read through, she brought in a lot of different histories from like different parts, which kind of like made me feel a little bit better. How are you in regards to that? And just overall, how much did we get done read? We're almost at like the halfway point of reading this book, and I just want to know how you feel about it. What are your thoughts? Favorite things, not so favorite things? Let me know either in the chat here or in the comments down below or in the blog post on my websites. Just, I don't know, talk to me. As usual, I will be starting off with my favorite quote. If you have a favorite quote that you liked, you're more than welcome to pop it down into the chat or in the comments if you're rewatching this later. Now I just need to find it. I know where it is because it was in regards to the middle world, and it was more of like a funny thing. Okay, that's after the Venn diagram. Okay, so this is on page 119, and it talks about, she's talking about the upper world, the underworld, and then the middle world. And this part of the middle world, she goes about like the Hermeticists call this the physical realm. And folks tend to agree that it is substantially real because our five senses perceive it in similar ways. And I giggled so much. It's not exactly like a super insightful quote or anything. It's just more of a quote that I found really funny because just just the way that she stated it, how, this middle world, this physical thing, most people do think it's real because we can perceive it with our five senses. And I just thought it was really, really funny. Yeah. So that is my favorite quote. What is your favorite quote for this through these pages that we're working on this time around? But overall, I think my favorite quote is still the first one, that ignorance is not an option anyone should take. That's still my favorite one out of all of them thus far. All right. I will be going through page by page with all the little notes that I have on the sides of it. I feel like we're really getting into the like the meat and potatoes of this information because it's been like fairly dense. And I love all the charts and different things that she's providing in the book too, that makes it seem way more like a textbook than just a book on spirituality or theology or whatever. So I just think that's pretty darn cool. Then she's talking about elemental forces and how the four essential ingredients that compose the matter, things that we consider to be water, fire, earth, and air, have been used since 490 BCE in Sicily. I just think that is so mind-blowing. And it's by, I'm gonna butcher this name, Empedocles work. But just to put it into perspective, the four elements were introduced in his doctrine, or like the in his studies, around 490 BCE. Well, no, I'm so sorry. He was born around 490 BCE. That's not when his information came around. So let's just say, I don't know, 20 years later or something like that. That's still about 2,500 years ago. And that is so mind-blowing. The things that us as witches and practitioners have been using since, you're getting into studying witchcraft, the five elements, the water, fire, earth, air, and spirit, that kind of thing that we use now, has been around. This idea has been around for over 2,500 years. I love that. I think that is so cool. It is just crazy, completely crazy to me. I also want to bring up a portion of her book, or like a thing that she said in her book, so I can hear your thoughts on it. She talks about that according to the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, everything in the below matter, for example, our tangible world here, has a mirror image in the above of spirit. Elemental energies are the pure spiritual essence that interweaves the material world. We have the saying, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so yourself. I think I butchered that quote. I have a headache. If I'm being a little funky today, I'm sorry. I just kind of want to hear your thoughts and the perspective on like the mirroring thing. We've talked about cause and effect and neutrality in the previous book club meetings, that sort of stuff. And I believe it's more of like a cause and effect. I wouldn't exactly think of it being as a mirror image. And she talks about how it's not like a mirror image to a mirror image, it's more of like a mirror image in the spiritual sense compared to the physical sense here. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Then she provides a chart in regards to the alchemical, scientific, and physiological associations with the four classic elements. I like how she's combining, science and witchcraft into this kind of stuff. So she talks about how Earth is celestial salt, it is a solid, the fundamental force is gravitational force, qualities are stability, rest, inertia, strength, solidity. The alchemical properties is dry and cold, and the aspect of self is physical human body. Now, I'm not entirely sure I fully go alongside with the chart she put down. It just seems that it could be a little bit of a stretch for me, just the way that it's kind of like perceived or explained. What do you think? But I do like how she provides the visual aid and how things are connected, or her thought process are and how things are connected. Now, she does say that all of these four elements, our life depends on it, our physical life, not just our spiritual sense or anything beyond that within our practice or whatever. It's that we literally, for example, we literally need air molecules to breathe, water molecules to drink, the vitamins, minerals, and matter of earth to eat, and warmth and light of the sun's fire to even exist on planet Earth. And I like how she puts that into perspective, because the four elements, five elements, including spirit, does not have to be exactly just in a spiritual sense for us to work with it, nor does it need to be just in the physical sense for us to work with it. It's both, and we're able to get the ideas from the physical sense of that element to the spiritual sense better to get our magical path, our workings to be more effective. And I think I'm kind of rambling without really making sense. Yeah, to me it made sense. I don't know if that made sense to you. So we have both the physical and the spiritual portion of these five elements, and we need both to exist, but we can't just think of it as one or the other, as just a physical or just in a spiritual sense. We need both. Yeah, I think that summarizes it all. Then she talks about descriptions and different ways of the elements, how they were described previously. She goes into quite a lot of detail on kind of like the scientific side of it, such as air was described as both tangible atmosphere and intangible volatile substratum, which may be termed spiritual air, that is pervading and mediating. Fire is a spiritual ethereal flame manifesting through a material substantial flame that is active, energizing, and transforming, and so on and so forth. She talks about those kind of things. But she puts it into like such a scientific-y perspective and breaks it down and how it's connected and like the spirituality and the reasons behind of why we associate those attributes with it giving examples not just from a witch's perspective, but from a scientific, from a physical, from a historical perspective, from an alchemical perspective, from a perspective within yourself. And it's a full-on textbook, and I think it is so cool to see magic be talked about this way. I love it. Then another thing she talks about in the above, that there are subtle spiritual layers of things that are beyond perception by our five senses. There is an energy we may direct and spiritual beings within that element with which we may partner to create change that we desire. Yes, I wholeheartedly and completely agree. Just because we're not able to fully observe those energies, we're able to feel it, to call it, and to work with them and to create a partnership, that sort of thing. Then I found it really interesting how she gave each of the elements a specific kind of not animal, a spiritual being or a class of spiritual beings, which I've kind of heard about. For example, mermaids, that kind of thing, or sirens. Those were automatically, for me, a water element type of animal. But I didn't really think of different things being connected with different elements. So that was something new that I learned. She talks about how Earth is gnomes, and how under that, like, gnomes topic, which includes goblins, dwarves, brownies, etc., air is sylphs, such as fairies, pixies. The water is the undines. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. Who are fish-like, human, who have fish and human-like features, or more people. Then fire is salamanders, or some consider it to be as like dragons or fire drakes, that sort of thing. I never really, like, I knew it was kind of there, and some of these that she mentioned does make sense to be under that kind of element, but I never really connected that it's like a thing. Does that make sense? So that's something new I learned, which I thought was pretty interesting. Then she talks about those elements and how she works with them and how she perceives these specific elements, and how your subconscious perceive these beings will rely on your own awareness and symbol sets. So if you go to work with the element of fire, comparison to when I go and work with the element of fire, each of us would be able to interact with that element in our own unique way. We won't exactly have the same exact experience. We might not visualize the same exact thing, but we will still be able to work with that element. And I absolutely agree with her how she always points out that it's your own individual journey. Yeah, I love it. Then she goes and talks more in regards to the elementals that go alongside with the elements. So giving them more names. And I like having names to things. It just makes me feel more in control with the energies that I'm working with who I'm calling forward to. And I didn't really know that. So going over, so this is who governs the air sylphs are the Peralda. Then the Jinn governs the essence of fire. The Nexa governs the essence of water, and the Gob governs the essence of earth. Yeah, that was something new to me. I didn't really know they had names. I thought that was really, really cool. Then she talks about a rainbow spectrum of gender expression. Now, this is in regards to the elements or the elementals. And she talks about how some are perceived more to be leaning towards one gender versus the other, but they don't really have a biological gender. And one of the things that she says is that regarding the gender of these rulers of the elementals being all male, she begs to differ, and that she strives to remove the patriarchal bias found in foundational Wicca from the 20th century. This is not an issue of biological sex because elemental essences have no biology, rendering that notion ridiculous. Really like that. And then at the end of that paragraph, she also talks about that she encourages you to arrive with an open mind to ask them directly yourself. We have sacred permission to shine a new light onto old lore and allow these evolving spiritual beings to be recognized with fresh eye. And I just love that. I love how she opens up a conversation to have a conversation with the elements you're working with, because it does not need to be one-sided. It is two-sided. They are alive. It's an element. It has its own energy, its own essence. It is able to communicate with you in a sense, not exactly like human to human, but they are still able to communicate with you. So you being open and direct and asking how they would be preferred to be perceived by you is a great way to start a connection working with those elements. Then she talks about the elemental gateways, or calling in the four corners of the elements when you open up a circles or do any sort of spiritual workings. And she talks that the elemental realms exist between the worlds, and so does the witch's circle. Therefore, we need energies of the between to stabilize the energy construct. I love how she explains it more in like a formal way. It's definitely something I have always been doing if I'm doing any sort of intensive, I don't want to really say intensive, but something more than just, an affirmation type of working. I love to call in the 4 points of the compass, the 4 elements into it, just to have a sense of balance and security, that sort of thing, in one way or another, either just calling them in or over by name or having something that represents them be within the vicinity of what I not kind of like exposed to the outside without things being in balance. I always like to do that with my workings, and I highly encourage you to do that as well if you have not done so already. It does not need to be, super formal in a complete like ritualistic sense. It could just be like water, fire, earth, and air. I call you to come be present with me here. That's that. Oh, I got goosebumps when I just said that. Okay. So they're happy about it. Oh no, like for real. Full on goosebumps when I just said that. I don't know if the camera's able to pick it up. I have that like smoothing filter on there. So probably not. Then as she talks about these, 4 sacred directions, these 4 elements, and that's a lot of references from various books. And that kind of makes me feel a little bit intimidated because I've been a practitioner for a very long time. But I just always, the more that I learn as a practitioner, the more that I learn that I have more to learn. And it's a never ending circle. So there's that. Now, moving on. Ah, yes. So she talks about correspondences with specific elements or things or items in general. I'm kind of generalizing it. She is talking about the elements in the correspondences, but I am generalizing it a little bit because it has been a question throughout my YouTube channel before and things that I have talked about before. If there is, for example, okay, let's go with the elements. Water. Water is seen as a symbol in this book and through a lot of many other spiritual teachings as being the element for emotion, for a lot of feelings, for like the depth of a person. It is fluid, it is movable, it is water, that kind of thing. That is a correspondence and idea for water built in various religions, various cultures, various studies, and has been used by a variety of people. I myself use that sort of correspondence. But If that is not a correspondence that you feel towards water and you've always felt strongly for something else, you are more than welcome to use that correspondence that you feel towards water. She talks about here that if there's a lot of magical power built into these traditions over time, when the same symbol, thought, idea, or vision is held focused in the mind of many and fed power for a long time, this becomes its own powerful thought form called an egregore. This egregore is shared energetic construct among a group of people who agreed upon its function. What that means is we have that correspondence kind of set there, and hundreds, thousands of people use that element with that correspondence, putting power into that correspondence, connecting it to that element, meaning it has a stronger connection to that correspondence. Not that it is 110% exactly just that. If you see it in a different sense, then you are welcome to work with it in a different sense. She just points out that a lot of people use it in one way, then it has more of a magic towards that reference because a lot of people have been pouring that energy, that intention, that correspondence into that one thing. And I like how she points that out. And she talks about an egregore, like tapping a keg, that others have filled for her. So even if I don't know what beer does, if I wander in and drink the beer, I'm going to get drunk the way it was intended by the maker. So even if you don't fully have a clear correspondence in your mind for the element water that we're using as an example, if you just go along and use that element's correspondence as you've read in this book or in other witches books for that thing, then you are tapping into that collection of power for that correspondence, and that is what will work for you. I hope that makes sense. I feel like that could be a little bit advanced for those who are just starting out and who are very worried and concerned about correspondences and doing the wrong thing with the wrong herb or that sort of stuff. But I really like how she talks about it and how she mentions that if there's a collection of people having the same thoughts for it, it has more power and substance towards that, but it doesn't have to be that if it's not what works for you. Yes. Moving on. Then she has a full section about the pentacle, the witch's star. And I just thought it was super cool because, again, she brings in history and science and math into it and just like connects all of these pieces that I've kind of like inherently knew, but really enjoyed reading about it like on the book. Like, I'm going to show you one of the things that she talks about the pentacle and just how long in history it has been used and by how many like cultures and that sort of things. And I just find it absolutely fascinating. And another thing, I knew of the golden ratio. I do art. I like art things. I've taken some art courses. Golden ratio was learned there. Then I've learned golden ratio through other spiritual practices, but I've never connected the golden ratio to the pentagram. Never. And this is what I mean by it being a witchy full-on textbook, because we have math in here. We have witches symbols and math. What? I love it. I think it's so cool. Then she talks about the witch's pentagram, which is just the star, and how it turns into a witch's pentacle, which is the star, and the circle around it. Ooh, I got goosebumps for that as well. And that Wiccans and witches, as far as they're concerned, regardless of the direction the star is turned, whether it be pointed upwards or pointed down, it would not signify evil at any time, and I 125% agree with that. Usually when the point is pointed upwards, you are receiving energy, and when it's pointed downwards, you are giving energy. That is kind of how I've viewed it. I've viewed it as a part of a whole, that sort of thing. Not that one was bad, the other one was good, or whatever. And these symbols have been used various cultures, various religions all throughout. To me, what's important is how I view it and how I work with it, and I don't really care about what anybody else thinks. Then she was talking about the Vesica Pisces symbol, which is another diagram we have here in the book. And she goes over and she explains this whole symbol, how there's the upper circle and the lower circle, and how it connects and intersects at a certain point, at the overlaps in a specific location, and how that overlap has different names. It could be, called the eye or the yoni. And then she like has this like whole spiel for like half a paragraph. And then she goes, it is basically a Venn diagram. That also kind of made me laugh. It is very true. But it's a fancy spiritual Venn diagram that talks about the upper, lower, and the middle world. That sort of thing. Which she then goes over in this chart here. I think that is just really cool. How we have, more math and other different types of symbols to explain witchcraft and spirituality and magic. Then she starts talking about the underworld, the middle world, the upper world, and information for that. How the upper world is masculine divinity. From the upper world, we get air and fire. For the middle world, then she talks about the underworld, which is the feminine divinity, ruled by the moon, and from there we get water and earth, and the upper world is ruled by the sun, the masculine symbol, that sort of thing. She goes over into a lot more detail on it than, which is where my favorite quote came from, that the middle world is, substantially real, considered by most people. She also talks about the Axis Mundi, which is the middle world, and how a lot of mythologies and religions and cultures have a symbol for the middle world, even though it might be something that you didn't really consider exactly as a middle world symbology. A big one is from like the Norse mythology, Yggdrasil, the world tree. Then some have mountains, some have trees, some have, poles or obelisks, that sort of things, different pathways. And even in science, there's a person kind of standing with like the arms spread out, that sort of thing, that also represents like the middle world, which is really cool. She creates a different image for that. And I really like this graph, this image. She ties in the chakras from the Hindu chakra system, and it's just a really good kind of diagram that explains us being kind of in the middle world, in the center, and how we are connected to that what is around us. Yeah. She also points out that there's no value judgments based on location within these cosmic maps. Just as I mentioned about the pentacle, one is there because of the other. It is a balance, it is connected. Both need to be present in order for it to exist. Just like you can't have light without dark, you can't have dark without light. It all needs to be there. She also mentions that our path requires us to continually check in and rebalance on all levels so that we can remain centered, connected, and effective. I like that. I like how she puts in little reminders throughout it. Kind of, she has like a big topic, she explains it, and then she does like a little bit of a reminder, that sort of things. Based on that, how many of you have journaled on a daily or maybe at least every other day basis since we started this? Because it is supposed to be part of the book, and I want to know if you've been, doing your homework with it. Then I want to read to you kind of like a fairly long paragraph about her perspective on what happens when you are more focused for one of these worlds instead of being within balanced. So, if we were to hyper focus on the middle world of the flesh, we might trip into a pitfall of self destructive hedonism or greed. If we were to take a page from the invasive orthodoxies denying the flesh to live solely for heavenly admission, we'd miss out on all the fun and the entire purpose of being embodied. Hyperfocus on the light, and you're ensnared by toxic positivity. Too much baking in the bright sun of the day is exhausting and will burn you out. By the same token, witches sometimes hyperfocus on the restful dark shadows of the underworld, dwelling overlong on death and spirit work, solely seeking their ancestors or trying to resurrect a long dead culture in memorial. Preferring the mystical macabre dark of the chthonic goddess, they may neglect the bright fires of their projective side and lose themselves in dreams, drowning in their own psychic and emotional depths. To be fair, this is the witch's aesthetic and plays an important counterpoint within the dominator over culture. However, they too would be well served to come above ground and enjoy a sunbeam every now and again. This is why a healthy practice of witchcraft dances to the beats of earthly elemental magic, lunar magic of the dark night, and solar magic of the bright day. All are sacred and necessary in balance. And I love that. I completely agree. What do you think? We then move on to the witch's jewel of power. And there's a couple sayings that she goes over, for example, to will, to dare, to be silent, or to wonder, to surrender, to accept, and to resonate. And where they were introduced from like certain different books and stuff. I really like that. Then she talks about the Levi's 4 powers of the Sphinx, which was kind of new to me until I kept reading, and it was talking about the witch's pyramid. The 4 powers of the Sphinx came prior to the witch's pyramid. I knew of the witch's pyramid, which is the 4 points for the elements, and the top point being spirit. At first I was just like, this sounds really familiar, but I've never heard it being called that way. Another part from that is to know, to dare, to will, to keep silent. Oh, I reread that from a different part. Okay, I have them underlined twice. They're good to say twice anyways. Then she talks about the witch's pyramid and then the inverted pyramid. So the jewel kind of sort of shape. Everything, if you've studied, witchcraft before or Wicca before, you might know about the witch's pyramid, which is kind of like, I used it more of a sense to draw in that energy. So the 4 bottom points are the elements, and then the top part is the spirit. Now, because it is on a base such as this and pointing upwards, with the connected top part, meaning, where is it? It's here. It's projective. It's projective with the top part, and that ends up giving it a masculine energy sense. And then she brings in the inverted pyramid, which has the same 4 points, just the point being on the bottom, turning it kind of like into a diamond sort of shape. And she talks about that being the receptive power of the feminine. I really like this perspective. I've mostly worked with the witch's pyramid on the top. I've never really stopped to think about how it might be unbalanced because it's mostly masculine energy. But if you use both feminine and masculine energy, then it balances out and you're able to get it to be more effective. And she has like a good chart on it. I will go over it in a little bit. Which is why we read, why we learn things. Which is why I love to read witchy books, because there's things that I have done for a while and something might not have been, feeling the best with it. And then I read about this and be like, oh, well, if I try to, work with it in balance, then it might be better. I don't know. We'll see. I will continue on my craft for many more years. Let's see what else I will learn. So the pointed up pyramid is yang, and it's supposed to be the phallus of the god. And then the inverted pyramid pointing down is yin energy, which is the womb of the goddess. And she has a diagram here for it, and I really really like that explanation, and I'm going to go over it for you. For example, starting off with the Yang pyramid, the projective, the divine polarity is the great god, direction is pointing upward. Altar tool is athame or ritual blade, symbolizes the phallus. The relationship is self-improvement and personal. The tide is projective elemental mysteries. Air, knowledge and awareness, to know. Communicating, clear intention, awakening. Fire, passion and drives. To will, discipline, physical action taken to manifest desires, mastery, that sort of stuff. And that is pretty much how I have been using that pyramid or that imagery within my workings. The next one is the Yin pyramid, which is the receptive. It is the great goddess pointing downwards. It is either the chalice or cauldron, symbolizes the womb. The relationship part is societal improvement and interpersonal. It is receptive elemental mysteries. So for air, it's to wonder, open-mindedness, releasing perceived ideas, questioning, inspiration. Fire, to surrender, humility, releasing fears to be tempered by divine will, allowing change. Then she continues with the water and earth for those symbols for the other stuff, and the ether, or like the directive of spirit. I just love that. Now, going over it, I wonder if I haven't felt so out of balance using this type of pyramid or this type of working because I am very feminine. Not because I'm female, but because I'm more feminine than I am masculine. So maybe my own energies kind of balanced out that very masculine perception of the pyramid. Potentially. Let me know your thoughts on it if you've worked with, the pyramid, or if you knew about the inverted pyramid or any of this, or if this is just brand new to you. I kind of would love to hear about, like your thoughts on it. So that's maybe my theory why I was still able to work fairly effectively with just half of the pyramid, pretty much, because I myself portray very feminine energies and am able to balance out the masculinity of that symbol. I don't know. What do you think? Then she talks about she puts in like a little bit of a reminder here. Remember how I told you that she kind of goes over something, then like puts in a little reminder for you to like think more deeply about? Is that for you to both remember that you are the incarnation of divinity on earth, and then to empower yourself as a sovereign within your kingdom. You are in charge of your own power, your own future, your own energy, and what you are trying to accomplish. Yes. Then I like how the next few pages, she goes, the knife goes in the cup. That's the title for the thing, and I thought it was like kind of funny. She talks about the pyramid and how they were how the Pymander, all who were created from their merging, were made in their image and inherently all gendered. In what began as a fertility religion, and on one metaphorical level, it still is. Then she talks about the jewel of power, and I like this diagram here. She again brings up that the jewel of divinity is a mirror image of the material world. And if you like take a look at it, you're able to see the pyramid parts of it, the symbols, the elements that correspond alongside with it. I just think that this diagram is a really good visualization to have when you are working with these energies or trying to like find balance or meditate alongside with it. And that is pretty much it. So she calls it this new construction of elemental balance, the witch's jewel of power. Now, when she calls witches or names things witches, and if I say witches, I don't mean witches in a female term, because the term witch is gender neutral. Only Hollywood ended up bringing it up as it just being, you know, witches are female and wizards and warlocks are male and that sort of thing. And that's just not the case. A witch is just a practitioner of magic, regardless of your gender. So the elemental balance, the witch's jewel of power, is for all practitioners to use, regardless of your gender. That is where we stopped. We stopped right before the third meditation, the Axis Mundi tree. Then I didn't read through it. I didn't read any further through that, because, you know, that's not on our section yet. Though I am going to read and record the meditations out loud. That way you're able to use them as a guided meditation. I'm going to try to do it this week. I hope I can. I will at least get one of them out, because we're currently on meditation number 3, and I'm gonna try to get at least this one out. I don't know. I don't really want to promise anything, but I really want to do that for you and for me to go over it afterwards. Let's see how I feel. Let's see how things go. It'll go well, right? Yeah. So that is it for today. We went over all the pages, and look at just how much we went through. That is so exciting. I have so many like sticky notes and tabs and all of bunch of things written in here, and it really does feel like a textbook. Yeah. The next meeting, we're going through page 132 until page 164. Yes, and then we will have just 2 more meetings before Samhain. We're almost there. We're almost at that point. Now, if you have an e-reader and you don't have page numbers, we are going from the 3rd meditation up until, well, until the tools of elemental water. So everything from before tools of elemental water and between the 3rd meditation. I hope that helps for you to be able to follow along better. Now, if you're not following along exactly with the pages, or you're a little bit behind, or maybe you're even ahead, that is totally okay. You could just come hang out when you want to, leave comments. I would really appreciate any sort of like feedback or communication, that sort of thing, from those who are joining in, participating in later, just so I know that I'm explaining things well, understandably, that the book is interesting, or if you have other suggestions, that kind of thing, quotes or whatever. Just it would be great for some feedback. Yeah, I know I'm late on this one, so not everybody was able to join me as who wanted to, and I didn't really give you enough heads up that I'm going to be an hour late for this. But the next ones, I will try to be my best on time. All right, and with that, I hope you did enjoy this video. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe, the whole shebang. We have tons of magical fun here. Don't forget to check out my website for the previews of for the blog posts of these meetings with other extra little bits of information, and I include printables on there and the photos of the graphs and that sort of stuff. All right, and with that, I will see you on the next video. Love you all. Bye.